So today's episode is going to be a little bit strange. I'm not going to do the intro. I'm not going to do the fan art. I'm not going to do any of that because it's a little more morbid. So graphic content warning, the video I'm about to show is literally snuff. Like, a person dies, but I kind of need to show it for context because this video has shown a particular mentality that's prevalent on the internet right now that's more than a bit concerning. So, for those who've been living under a rock, this is Summer Taylor. She was 24 years old, and she was protesting for the Black Lives Matter movement, but her life was violently cut short when she was struck by a car. So I'm going to show the footage, and then we're going to get into the messy details. Alright, if you need to take a break, or you need to pause the video and go get a drink and take some time for yourself, then by all means. You literally just watched the moment that led to this person's death. So I can completely understand if you want to take some time, pause the video, and come back in a little bit. For the rest of us, we're gonna go ahead and trek on. So what I'm about to show next are some tweets from Ian Miles Chong, and if you've had the unfortunate circumstances that have led you with crossing paths with this post-gargled cum stain of an excuse for a human being, then I salute you. Here, he says that 2 Seattle protesters just got ran over. Don't stand in the middle of the road at night. Damn. Now, there is some context that needs to be brought up, but I'll get to that in a second. It then goes on to tweet that 2 people got hit and they look like they ran into the path of the car after it swerved to the left to avoid the other protesters. Why the hell? The white van parked sideways, blocked traffic, and made it impossible for the oncoming driver to see if anyone was behind it. This is 100% the protesters' fault for blocking traffic and running behind those vehicles where any incoming driver could not have possibly known they were. Likely, they probably couldn't see the car coming when they ran into its path. The driver did not accelerate to hit the protesters on purpose. You can see the driver apply the brakes right before they cleared the van, once the protesters come into view. Now, if you have, as I stated before, had the unfortunate circumstances of crossing paths with Ian, then you would know that he's one of the closest things to actually being an internet neo-Nazi. Now, I'm not using Nazi in the sense that he's somebody I don't like, and therefore I'm going to call him one of Hitler's youth. The guy has a literal decades worth of chat logs showing that he's a flagrant racist, Nazi sympathizer, saying lovely things like Hitler is my fucking idol, saying such wonderful things as the Holocaust isn't important enough to capitalize because Jews are nothing. He's also literally tried to get people who disagree with him killed by engaging in the time-old internet prank tradition of swatting, where after you have figured out somebody's living address, you then tell the local police department that they're holding children captive, or whatever lie you have to tell them to make the SWAT team come in and break down the door, usually resulting in some kind of firefight, and if you are so lucky, perhaps the person you are swatting will be killed. Proving that A, you won the most arguments on the internet, and B, you're too much of a coward to dirty your own hands. Now, I'm not saying that it is more ethical to do the murder yourself. What I am saying is swatting is unethical, period. And what I'm also saying is, this means that we might actually have a bit of credence for dismissing anything Ian says. Now, I pointed out earlier that there is some context that needs to be mentioned, and I'll get to that, trust me, but there is one more example I'd like to give, of one more piece of literal human grifting garbage, who I'd like to talk about before I further contextualize what happened with Summer. Because Summer's death is tragic, this is true. This is not a thing that should have happened. But I did not know Summer. I don't have a lot of details to give there, but the reaction around these events is what I find troubling. We've seen how Ian has tried to contextualize events, throwing all the blame onto the protesters and not onto the driver. Can we get any other wonderful examples of victim blaming? Ah, of course, Tim Pool. Tim. Oh, Tim. Giving us such wonderful insight as we need to do better to teach our kids not to hang out on interstate highways at night while wearing all black around a curve and with vehicles blocking view of you and your friends. Now, if you need to know what a Tim Pool fan looks like, I've met a few, and I've seen a few in comment sections, and there are two distinct types of Tim Pool fans. There are the people who are centrist or lean a little bit to the left and think that Tim Pool provides a wonderful bit of unbiased education about politics for his audience. They have thoroughly convinced themselves that Tim is on the left, and therefore, when he criticizes the left, it should be viewed with some air of legitimacy. I'm sorry, but the only person who calls Tim Pool a lefty is Tim Pool. Nobody with two functioning brain cells to ejaculate together could actually make such a mistake after viewing literally anything he does, posts, or says. But I'm not here to criticize Tim's politics. What I am here to criticize is the fact that Tim, like Ian, is throwing all the blame on the protesters. Which leads me to the other half of Tim's audience. There are those who are so thoroughly deluded that Tim is actually speaking from a point of view on the left and not just a thorough grifter like Dave Rubin. And then there are those that recognize what he is and celebrate it. And that is an exceptionally useful tool for the right wing of politics. But not just your standard conservative who wants to go back to some traditional family values and maybe champion capitalism a bit. It's a bit more cruel than that. You see, there's a particular nastiness to a certain type of Puritan culture that is bred from the standards of conservatism that Tim Pool actually speaks from. And you can find a few of those examples in these people who I can only assume are Tim Pool fans, as they are the ones responding directly to his tweet. You get the standard voice of reason saying we need to teach people not to commit murders and drive on closed highways. And then, of course, you have the Tim Pool fan, again, allegedly. It was good riddance by the look of it. But why is it good riddance? Why is it good that one of your fellow human beings who hasn't harmed anybody is dead? Oh, I know why. We can actually go to the next tweet from another one of Tim Pool's fans to see why. They don't use this picture for some reason. Well, what could the reason be, Rich? What could the reason possibly be at away_rich? Is there something about her having gauges and tattoos that actually causes this to be a justified killing? Like, is that it? Note, I am saying her, but I do recognize that this person was actually NB, though as I'm not sure what their personal pronouns were, I'm going to stick with the phenotype. Then we have such wonderful insights like this one from Lisa E. I also feel bad for the driver who did nothing wrong, but now has to live with the guilt that they hit a person by accident. People need to go home and back to work. So, first of all, maybe it's the socialist who should be telling you that life isn't just work, and if you think it is, then you've bought into the shit end of a raw deal. Also, most of us have what's called a 40-hour work week, and that means that we can protest when that work week is over, or whenever the work is over in general. Most of my friends who have been at protests have full-time jobs, if not jobs that they work overtime at, and have still managed to protest. But I'm glad that you're such a bastion of logic. Secondly, I do not feel bad for the driver at all. In fact, I only feel bad that the driver was dumb enough to do this. We're going to get into a couple of YouTube comments, and then we'll get into that context that I have been promising you for so long. I just want to thoroughly show the exact side of the aisle most of the people who are arguing in favor of the driver are coming from. From however the hell I pronounce this on YouTube, I don't know what's that abomination, but looks like good riddance if anything. Followed by a James Murphy saying, I love stories like this with a happy ending. We now have one less liberal idiot who was full of tattoos, had purple hair, and was a troublemaker and couldn't figure out what gender she was in the world. This was a very good thing. So, I don't think there's any question as to what someone like Rich from earlier is trying to imply with the picture of her with her tattoos showing. So these sacks of cum-filled garbage who parade as if they are human beings, which I guess means they should have a measure of my respect, maybe, seem to have this Puritan ideal of what a woman should look like or what a person should look like in general. They're so thoroughly ingrained in things like a gender binary and typical gender roles that if somebody doesn't fit their paradigm, they are so thoroughly dehumanized and otherized that it's a good thing if they die. Now, I know in this video I have engaged in a certain level of dehumanization as well, but this does not mean that I think these people are fit for death. I think people that have sunk even this low can still recover and become better people later in life. But Speaking of wonderful insights, we have one from Numero Zero. You failed to mention it was a black driver. Well, that's not a failing to mention. It literally doesn't matter. There are just as many black people who support the BLM movement as there are who don't. The person's skin color stopped mattering a long time ago when it was made very clear that the protests are about police brutality on the whole. But finally, we land on another series of comments. Good riddance to that loony pink-haired land whale. The driver deserves a medal for ridding the earth of that loony liberal pink-haired land whale. I don't think I need to read further into the comments to exemplify my point. The point is, there are people like Ian, Tim, and their fans, and other people in general, who are not worthy of time and consideration and conversation. If someone has sunk so far to where they are at this point, I do believe they can recover, but I also don't think it's anybody's responsibility to engage with them anymore. I think we've got to the point where we can just point and laugh because they're acting no differently than a kindergartner chewing paste. At least, that's the level of argumentation coming from that side of the political bent right now. But now for that context that I promised before, that thing that throws all this into perspective. You know, aside from the people celebrating the literal murder of a human being, no amount of contextualizing can reframe that. For weeks now, all the entrances to that section of the I-5 in Seattle, Washington have been closed, barricaded up by law enforcement to allow for the protests in that area. While technically walking on the I-5 is considered illegal, there are a couple things to factor in. The first one is that the place was literally barricaded off for the protesters. These were official barricades put up by law enforcement. And two, even if they weren't, doing something illegal that doesn't harm somebody does not constitute your swift death. The driver in this instance had to actually bypass state barricades and then accelerate into the people. So for anybody trying to say that this was some kind of an accident, no, this has all the reekings of deliberate targeting. It's also not the only time that protesters have been deliberately targeted in this way. There were Seattle police officers who, while off duty, were also trying to drive through and break up the protests. You know, the non-violent protests, the protests that were happening the way that everybody supposedly says they're supposed to be happening. You know, those ones. Those protests that had no reason to go violent at all because nothing bad ever happens to peaceful protesters because peaceful protesters are doing it the right way. You know, the right way. The way that gets them killed. You know, like that video that I made weeks ago pointing out how there's no such fucking thing as a non-violent protest. Only the willful acceptance that you'll have to take the bat to your head yourself. That's what happened here, and that's what happens all the time. You may not be comfortable, but it's a reality you're gonna need to accept. You exercise your First Amendment rights, somebody is going to want you dead. Somebody is going to want you killed. You guys want to know why I haven't covered God, Guns, Guts, and Glory in a long time as much as I'd like to? Because I was advised by local police officers not to cover him because he had issued what essentially amounted as a death threat towards me.
That was a bullseye.
And that engaging with him further by commenting on his blog would be considered provocation, and then I would be liable for anything that happened to me after that, because this is America, and apparently having an effigy of your face shot multiple times by a gun on the internet is considered a normal thing that people should be able to do no problem, and in no way constitutes a legitimate death threat, apparently. Even when you do these things the right way, someone is going to want you killed. And that sucks. These protesters, who were doing this peacefully, have been assaulted by vehicles multiple times. And in this instance, one person actually died. And that person was Summer Taylor. And if you forget that, then please remind yourself. I did not know Summer, but I didn't have to know her in order to take a more empathetic approach than people like Tim Pool. or Ian. Summer was exercising her First Amendment rights. Summer was exercising these in an area that was deemed safe due to local authorities putting up barricades. Oh, and her killer's name? That's public knowledge. It was DeWitt Khalid. Khalid's car hit both Summer Taylor and Diaz Love. Diaz is hospitalized in critical condition right now. The people who were protesting in Seattle here, and most importantly, Summer and Diaz, were operating under their First Amendment rights. The local authorities blocked off the area of the highway they were in for their safety. Standard illegality of walking on I-5 notwithstanding. DeWitt says that he is entirely remorseful for his actions, and a $1.2 million bail fund has been put on for him. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't think he's really remorseful. I think he's remorseful that he got caught. If you are so full of anger and rage that you are willing to murder your fellow human beings just because they're exercising their freedom of speech and you don't like what they're saying, then I have a very hard time believing you're remorseful for their death. And a lot of the internet isn't remorseful for their death either. When you drive the wrong way up a ramp that has been barricaded and accelerate past police cars in the barricade in order to expunge human life that merely disagrees with you, I can't sit here and believe that you're remorseful for killing those people. I can believe that you're remorseful for sitting in jail. I can believe that you're remorseful for the end result of your actions, but the actions themselves, those were premeditated. Something in your brain told you that this was a good thing to do. And I'm really familiar with this mentality. I used to work for it. I wish I had taken screenshots of a particular Facebook interaction that happened about a month ago. You see, I used to work at McDonald's, and there were two managers that I had at one of my stores before one got promoted to a store manager and the other left to go to another franchise. This was years ago, but the manager who left to go to the other franchise was a bit of a Republican conspiracy nut. Every day at work, I would hear him go on and on about how Obama was going to become a tyrannical overlord, how he was going to use martial law to take over the country and declare himself dictator. And at the time, I kind of agreed with him because I was really deep into my Alex Jones conspiracy theory fanboy phase. But now I look back on those conversations with a certain level of disgust and pity. The other manager, who went on to be a store manager, posted a video of a semi-truck plowing through protesters, and my other old boss, who after franchise hopping decided to become a truck driver, commented that he would have done the same and probably would have done more, because if people are that stupid, then he might as well, run them over. I commented on that post, saying that it was a really weird world when you see your old boss advocating for the murder of other sentient human beings. He then argues that if people are assaulting his vehicle, then he's going to do whatever he needs to defend himself, which is kind of a true statement, except that the video in question, much like with the video that I showed you guys here, was of a blocked off area where the semi drove through into protesters deliberately, even though the vehicle was not supposed to be there. When you circumvent barricades so that you can take your big rig and plow it through other living, breathing human people, then yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and call that murder, because there's premeditation. Heck, I was actually sent that video a few days ago from my mom, who didn't actually know the context of the entire video. It just showed protesters pulling the man from the vehicle and beating him, without showing the previous portions where he literally tried to execute them, and therefore this is now self-defense. And that's a narrative that's been spun amongst right-wing reactionaries for a while now, that all the protesters are violent animals that need to either be controlled or killed with violent force. While there are some protesters who certainly have stepped well outside of the line of what I deem as acceptable behavior, we actually have a case in Atlanta of an 8-year-old girl who got shot and killed, though whether it was provocateurs or protesters, I don't know yet. There's currently a $10,000 reward out there for anybody who gives information on the girl's killers. If it was a protester who did that, then yeah, that's well and beyond outside any acceptable lines. You don't kill people, and you most certainly don't kill a child. Period. The National Guard is now coming down into my state because you decided to do something so deliberately stupid, callous, and inhumane. So I guess the takeaway from this is that human life is important. And human life is not something that we should be celebrating being extinguished. Just because you don't agree with the message of Black Lives Matter does not mean you should celebrate whenever one of their protesters gets killed. And just because you agree, like I do, with the Black Lives Matter protests does not mean that you should go so far as to killing your fellow human being, as that undermines your message. Honestly, if you're somebody that takes people like Ian or Tim Pool seriously, maybe a video like this can function as a bit of a wake-up call as to what kind of audience they actually court. If you count yourself as one of their audience, then maybe it's time to give yourself a little bit of introspection and ask yourself why you think these people's opinions merit your time. They most certainly don't merit mine, unless, of course, I have to do another video. But if I sound really detached in this one, it's because, honestly, I'm getting tired. There's only so much of this crap that you can deal with before you finally just want to turn in the towel and play some video games. You know, do something easy. I don't want to say the name of the child who was killed, because that is a minor, but Summer Taylor was an adult. And Summer Taylor was being a true American citizen by exercising her First Amendment rights. She was killed callously. She suffered for 18 hours after being ran over as her body slowly failed her. And if you're the type of person that celebrates that, then maybe it's time to learn about the veil of ignorance and apply it here. Fall behind the veil and open it back up, and you're in her shoes, on the operating table, slowly having your organs give out, all because you dared have an opinion. All because you dared exercise your First Amendment rights to speak about that opinion. Is this a good thing now? Is this just? Is this the world you want to live in? And if you honestly say yes, well, you already stepped to the other side of the veil, and you've got 18 more hours. Make them count. As for the rest of you, if you've made it to the end of the video, then you're seeing all of my wonderful patrons on screen right now. I want to take this moment to thank you guys for watching. This stuff has been really eating at me, and I'm not really certain what my mentality is sitting at right now. But I guess I gotta keep pushing forward with all of this. I want to do another thank you for my patrons. You guys support the channel and allow me to eat and pay bills. And I guess the final thank you is to you, whoever you are watching this video right now. Ever since the channel got hijacked, my views have been utter crap lately. So the mere fact that you made it to the end of this video means the world to me. So thank you for supporting my channel in any way that you do. And as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.